Our next speaker, who I'm delighted to introduce, is Mr. Bhavesh Patel, who is the CEO and Chairman, Management of the Board of LyondellBasell. Mr. Patel first joined the company in 2010 in the Americas, where he successfully led the restructuring of the US businesses, significantly increasing efficiency. In this role, he also led the development of plans to take advantage of the shale gas expansion. He was then named Senior Vice President of Olefins and Polyolefins for Europe, Asia and International, based in the Netherlands. Under Mr. Patel's leadership, the company's operations in Europe and Asia have established a track record of strong performance through increased efficiency, streamlined operations, and a shift towards advantaged feedstocks. Mr. Patel is also chairman of the American Chemistry Council and a member of the board of the Union Pacific Railroad. And it's now my pleasure to invite him to the podium to present.
Thank you. All right, well, thank you for your kind introduction. I'm going to move away from the podium and offer a few remarks. First of all, good morning, Your Excellencies, valued partners, distinguished guests and colleagues. It's really an honor and a pleasure for me to be able to address on behalf of our company this very distinguished audience. Thank you, Dr. El Sadoun, for the invitation. So today I've been asked to talk about looking through cycles. As you know, in our industry, cycles are inevitable and disruptive shifts are inevitable. Think about shale gas and what it was 5-7 years ago compared to what it is today and how we think about investment. I'll touch on a few of those things. Now, normally when I show a slide introducing our company, I talk about our geographic presence, our revenue, our scale, the fact that we have 13,500 employees, half of which work outside the United States. Today I thought I'd do a little something different. I want to start with our legacy of innovation, the heritage of innovation that has built the company that we are today. It started a long time ago with our predecessor colleagues, Carl Ziegler and Giulio Natta. They were the forefathers of the polymer business, and they're the ones who discovered process technology and catalysts. And I'm pleased and very honored to call them our former colleagues from LyondellBasell. Companies like Hoechst, Montecatini, Mont Edison, BASF, Shell, Arco, many others have been part of the heritage that today is LyondellBasell. We're one of the largest polyolefin companies in the world. We have leading positions in Europe and the US, very large polypropylene compounding business. And I want to show you through the lens of our company how we think about managing through a cyclical and somewhat uncertain industry. As I was introduced earlier, many of you know that I joined the company about 8 years ago, and during that time, we were facing many, many challenges. We had come through the downturn, and we were entering somewhat of a tumultuous period for the company. Our focus back in those days was very simple. We had a strategy that was called Back to Basics. We focused on safe, reliable, cost-efficient operations, and we were relentless about that every day. I would submit to you today, 8 years later, that was the right strategy in the past, and one that definitely forms our future. Without that, we don't have a company. But on the other hand, next month, as we reach the 10-year anniversary of LyondellBasell, I would submit to you that these things alone will not lead to our success. We have to do more. While these are foundational focus areas by themselves, they will not define success in the future, and they will not give us the strength to be able to manage through cycles. So what does a company like ours do as we think about cycles? Well, first of all, let's examine what drives growth for the main product areas in polyolefins, for example. There are many, many megatrends which Neil just spoke of, and many other speakers earlier have spoken of. There's a burgeoning middle class in China, in India, and in many parts of the world. They're moving from farms to urban areas. The way they live, the way they consume food, the way it's packaged is driving the demand for polyolefins, polyethylene and polypropylene. Urbanization is a trend that will continue for many, many decades to come. It's something that has started and will not stop. People are living longer as well. And as people get older, their needs are different as time goes on. And I think that our industry has a role in enabling this longevity of life as well. There's been much said about electric vehicles and its impact on oil price and the impact on petrochemicals and so on. I think it represents both a threat and an opportunity for our industry. But if we focus more on the opportunity, then we have the chance to really take advantage of what could be a very major shift in the way people move around in the world, how they commute. There's a lot said about the next generation may not own cars. They may share cars. All of this could present opportunity should we choose to think of it that way. Now think about demand for polyolefins. In the last 25 years, polyolefin demand has grown steadily year after year through recessions, but for 1 year, in 2007, 2008. During that period, 2008, 2009, during that period we had a severe recession and an oil price downturn, and polymer demand did not grow. But for that, for 25 years, we've seen polymer demand grow year after year after year. This speaks to the growing consumer demand for food and other products that require plastics. On the lower right-hand side here, what you see is the per capita consumption of polyolefins. This graph shows tremendous potential for our industry and the amount of growth that's possible as this middle class comes of age in places like China and India and other maturing economies in the world. When I see this slide, I see opportunity. I see tremendous opportunity for our industry. So a company like ours, as we think about that opportunity in front of us, in addition to the safe, reliable, cost-efficient operations, we must focus more on innovation. That's why I led this presentation with innovation. More customer focus. Let me give you an example of some of the innovation that we're undertaking. We're currently constructing a new polyethylene plant in the US, which will be our latest polyethylene technology. We call it hyperzone polyethylene. It is a multimodal polyethylene product that will be produced. What I'm most proud of is the global collaboration in the company to develop this new technology. We had scientists in Ferrara, Italy, scientists in Frankfurt, Germany, and Cincinnati, Ohio, and marketers around the world interfacing with customers to make sure that we develop a very relevant technology which will address the needs of tomorrow. Sustainability is a very important topic, and this technology will address some of that as well. In that, this new technology will allow our customers to make whatever product they're making with less polyethylene and still have the same characteristics. It will use actually less plastic per unit of output. The customer focus is going to be very important, and I think it's important that we think about customer needs regionally as well, because the customer needs in China could be very different than the customer needs in Europe, than those in the US. And our team is firmly focused on that, and I think these additional focus areas will be very critical as we think through the opportunity that lies ahead of us in terms of growth. Let's examine the cost curve. So we've seen these many, many times. And the reason I raise this is only to show that while 4 or 5 years ago, we thought that the US would have a very strong and durable competitive advantage. Look at what's happened in 2016 as the oil price declined. The global cost curve flattened. Now, I'm not about to stand here and tell you what that might look like in 2021, but I think one thing we can probably all agree on, that there are a range of outcomes, and we must all think through how do we address that range of outcomes. Other considerations as we as a company think through investment, capital costs are much higher than they were 10, 15 years ago. Co-product prices have changed as oil prices have come down. And as we now aim to move more product out of the US to meet the needs of the world, supply chains will have to be more robust to be able to meet that higher demand for exports out of the US. There's a lot of variability and a lot of uncertainty in these factors. This is where scenario planning is very important, and thinking through the range of outcomes in each one of these considerations. And we as a company, when we undertake investments, we think through these scenarios and make informed decisions as we think about investment. As we think about growth, and we now think about investing through the cycle, a few considerations that I would offer for you as we think about things. First of all, I think you have to separate where you produce from where the markets are in some value chains. And in some value chains, you have to produce where the market is because there is not an advantage in terms of regional production. For example, the heavier parts of the value chain, C3, C4, higher, likely you will locate where the market is rather than where the feedstock is. Traditionally, we've located C2 production where the feedstock is, and perhaps that will continue. It's important to think through those expansions and think through how best to serve the regional needs. We've undertaken 2 very large greenfield projects to date. We're building this new polyethylene plant I described. We're also building the world's largest propylene oxide and tertiary butyl alcohol plant in Houston, also based on our technology, which was developed by ARCO many decades ago. These greenfield projects are the beginning of many others that we're considering, including in the polypropylene chain, which we will think through as time goes on. JVs have been an important part of our growth in the past. We have many strategic partnerships all over the world, including right here in the Gulf, which we value tremendously. Yesterday, we announced a new strategic joint venture with a company called Suez, where they will collect polypropylene post-consumer waste, and we will bring it back and recycle it and compound it and sell back to brand owners such as IKEA, Unilever, Procter & Gamble. It's important that we consider the circular economy and sustainability. And as we talked, as Neil earlier talked about waste in the oceans and so on, that is not somebody else's problem. That's our problem as an industry, and we must solve it. And we're quite proud of this small joint venture that we've started, and I hope that it's a platform that we'll build on for the future. As we think through growth, we don't think about growth as participation. We don't think about it as market share. We think about it as value creating for our shareholders and for customers. So in closing, it's not only important to have safe, reliable, cost-efficient operations, you also have to be innovation-minded, customer-focused, and think through where markets are going rather than where they are today as we undertake investments, which are investments for decades. They're not investments that we undertake for 5, 10 years. They're investments that will endure many cycles and many economic conditions. And so we're focusing on a lot more than the basics that we started with early in this decade, and we look forward to serving the needs of the future. So thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to the panel later.